Ever wish you had like a crystal ball so you could just see what's going to happen in the job market?
Right.
Well, we don't have magic,
Yeah.
but we do have the next best thing.
Oh.
It's the latest U.S. unemployment claims report.
Okay.
It's basically like a weekly checkup for the entire nation's employment situation.
I like that.
A checkup.
So if you're like working on your resume,
Yeah.
or you're just curious about the economy in general,
Right.
let's dive into this.
And while these reports might look like just a
bunch of numbers.
a big stack of dry numbers, yeah,
Yeah.
they actually reveal some fascinating stories about what's going on in different industries and regions across the U.S.
Yeah, right off the bat, the week ending January 4th,
Okay.
we saw a decrease in the number of initial unemployment claims down to 201,000,
Wow.
which is 10,000 less than the week before.
Okay.
And the 4-week moving average is also trending downwards.
Interesting.
At first glance, that sounds like good news, right? It does.
Yeah.
But the question is, why are those claims down?
Right.
Is it really a sign that the job market is strong, or are there some other factors at play here?
Okay.
To get a clearer picture, we really need to look at both the seasonally adjusted and unadjusted data.
I've definitely heard those terms before, but I sometimes mix them up.
Right?
Can you remind me why those are so important?
Yeah, so think of it this way. The seasonally adjusted data is kind of like smoothing out the wrinkles on a shirt.
Oh, okay.
It filters out those predictable ups and downs, like those holiday hiring surges and layoffs that we tend to see a lot.
Yeah.
This helps us spot those long-term trends.
Okay.
But sometimes those wrinkles, they can actually tell a story too. And the unadjusted data that gives us the raw numbers, which can reveal some surprises that we might miss otherwise.
Speaking of surprises, the unadjusted claims actually went up by over 21,000. That seems kind of contradictory to that positive trend that we saw earlier.
Yeah.
How do we make sense of that?
So while the unadjusted claims did increase, the expected seasonal increase because of the holidays was even higher.
Okay.
So the fact that that rise was smaller than predicted actually suggests there's some underlying strength in the labor market.
Interesting.
It's kind of like the market had to jump over a lower hurdle than we initially thought.
I see. So it's not just about whether the numbers go up or down.
Right.
It's about understanding the context
Exactly.
and expectations behind those numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it gets even more interesting when we zoom in on specific states. Michigan, for example, saw a big jump in claims, over 7,800.
Wow.
New Jersey and Pennsylvania weren't that far behind.
Wow. That's a big increase.
Yeah.
What's going on in those states that might explain this?
Well, it could be anything from like industry-specific layoffs to broader economic shifts that are happening at the state level.
Interesting.
Each state has its own little economic microcosm, right?
Right.
It's influenced by those dominant industries, local policies, even just demographics.
Okay, so it's like each state is telling its own little story.
Exactly.
Within the big story of the national job market.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of some interesting state-level trends, California had the biggest decrease in claims.
Wow.
Which seems a little counterintuitive,
Yeah.
given its large population and sometimes volatile economy.
Right.
What might be driving that positive trend in California?
That's a great question. And it really highlights how important it is to really dig deeper.
Yeah.
It could be several different things, right? Strong growth in specific sectors, effective state-level policies, or even just a temporary dip in claims that kind of evens out over time.
Okay.
We would need to investigate further to really pinpoint the exact reasons.
Right. It's a reminder that these numbers aren't just these abstract figures.
They represent real people.
Exactly.
And their actual livelihoods. Like, the report mentions layoffs in manufacturing, transportation, and even education.
Imagine you're a truck driver and you're suddenly laid off in Michigan.
Right.
Or a teacher in New Jersey facing job uncertainty.
Wow, yeah.
These numbers have real-world consequences.
Absolutely.
And it's really important to remember that as we look at all this data.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in just like the statistics of it all.
Right.
But ultimately, this is about people's lives.
Absolutely.
And their ability to earn a living.
Yeah, and that brings us to another really crucial point.
Okay.
We can't just look at these unemployment claims in isolation.
Right.
They're really just one piece of a much bigger economic puzzle.
So what other pieces of this puzzle do we need to like fit together
Yeah.
to get that full picture?
We got to think about how these claims relate to other things.
Okay.
Like inflation, interest rates, consumer spending.
Okay.
All these things are interconnected.
Right. And they influence each other in really complex ways.
It sounds like understanding the economy is like detective work.
It really is.
Piecing together all these little clues from different sources to try to see that bigger picture.
Exactly.
And speaking of clues, let's look a little deeper into the different types of unemployment claims that are reported.
Okay.
So we've mainly been talking about initial claims.
Right.
But there are also continuing claims too, right?
Yes. Continuing claims track those folks who are already receiving unemployment benefits.
Okay.
Week after week.
I see.
And they offer really valuable insight into how long people are staying unemployed.
Okay.
And whether they can find new jobs quickly.
So how did continuing claims fare in this latest report?
So the seasonally adjusted insured unemployment rate,
Great.
which is a measure of those continuing claims as a percentage of the workforce, remained unchanged at 1.2% for the week ending December 28th.
Okay.
But remember, we always want to check that unadjusted data as well.
Right. And what does that unadjusted data tell us?
That unadjusted number of continuing claims actually jumped up a lot.
Wow.
By over 316,000.
Wow.
Reaching a total of over 2.17 million people receiving those benefits.
So that's a pretty big increase.
Yeah.
What might be contributing to that rise?
Well, part of it is probably due to those seasonal factors that we were talking about before.
Okay.
But we also need to remember that some states offer those extended benefits.
Right.
Beyond the typical 26 weeks of unemployment insurance.
Okay.
So that could also be a factor driving that increase.
So it's not necessarily a sign that the job market is weakening.
Right.
It's more a reflection of the policies and support systems in place in those different states.
Exactly.
Okay. And speaking of some state-specific details, the report also gives a breakdown of those insured unemployment rates by state.
Right.
Which can reveal some interesting variations in those labor market conditions across the country. I'm curious which states had the highest insured unemployment rates.
For the week ending December 21st, the highest rates were in New Jersey at 2.4%.
Okay.
Rhode Island at 2.3%. Minnesota at 2.2%.
Okay.
And Washington also at 2.2%.
Oh.
And those are all way higher than the national average.
So even within a seemingly strong national job market, there are these pockets of higher unemployment in certain regions.
Exactly.
What about those states with the lowest rates? What can we learn from those?
Those states with rates well below that national average might suggest a tighter labor market in those areas.
Okay.
And again, it emphasizes that those regional variations can really be influenced by so many different things.
Right.
The type of industries that dominate each state, the specific policies they implement.
So many different factors.
So many factors.
Right. It reinforces the idea that the U.S. economy is like a giant tapestry.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
Woven together from the experiences of all those individual states, each with its own unique set of challenges and opportunities.
I like it.
And we've only just begun to unravel the threads of this really intricate tapestry.
Exactly. And as we continue our deep dive, we'll explore even more layers of this complex and really fascinating economic landscape.
Awesome. I'm excited to learn more.
Me too.
So we've been digging into all these unemployment numbers.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that while they give us a snapshot of the job market, they don't really tell the whole story.
Right.
Of how people are actually doing financially, do they?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Those traditional measures, like the unemployment rate, they're helpful, but they only show part of the picture.
Right.
There's this growing idea that we need to look beyond just whether someone has a job or not.
So what else should we consider
when
we're trying to understand what's actually happening economically for people?
Well, for starters, we need to think about underemployment. These are people who are maybe working part-time, but would really prefer full-time hours, or they're in jobs that just don't use all their skills and education.
Right. They're technically employed,
yeah,
but they might be struggling financially.
Exactly. They're stuck in a job that doesn't match their potential or their financial needs.
And I imagine that can be really frustrating.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you've got the whole gig economy, which has just exploded recently.
Yeah.
You've got freelancers, independent contractors, all these workers who often fall outside the traditional definition of what it even means to be employed.
So they're contributing to the economy.
Yeah.
But they're not always captured in those standard unemployment statistics.
Exactly. It's like this whole segment of the workforce is flying under the radar.
So how do we account for these more nuanced situations when we're trying to understand how healthy the job market is?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Economists and policymakers are really struggling with that right now. One way to think about it is to look beyond just the unemployment rate and think about things like the labor force participation rate.
Okay.
This is a way to measure the percentage of working-age people who either have a job or are actively looking for one.
Okay, so if that labor force participation rate is declining,
Yeah.
could that be a sign that people are just getting discouraged and giving up on even trying to find work?
It could be, but it's not always a bad sign.
Oh.
It could also mean that people are choosing to not work for other reasons.
Okay.
Like going back to school, taking care of family, or starting their own business.
Right, so it's much more complex than just looking at whether people have jobs or not.
Exactly.
We need to understand the motivations and circumstances behind those numbers.
Absolutely.
Are there other ways that we can get a more detailed look at what's going on in the job market?
Yeah, absolutely. Another approach is to just gather more specific data on people's actual work experiences.
Okay.
Like how many hours are they working?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of work are they doing? Are they satisfied with their jobs?
Yep.
How have their wages changed over time?
It's like we need to move beyond just looking at how many jobs there are.
Right.
And actually look at the quality of those jobs.
Exactly.
Are people happy in their jobs?
Yeah.
Are they making a living wage?
Mm-hmm.
Can they move up in their careers?
Exactly. And by collecting this kind of information, we can start to see a more complete and human-centered picture of what workers are facing today.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
But also a little overwhelming.
It does feel a little overwhelming.
There's a lot to keep track of.
What advice would you give to just like the average person who wants to stay on top of what's happening with the job market?
It is a lot to process.
Yeah.
But there are some really great resources out there.
Yeah.
For starters, the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes a ton of data on employment wages and other economic stuff.
Okay.
Their website is like a gold mine.
So that's a good place to start for the raw data. What about for like the analysis and interpretation of these trends?
Yeah, there are a lot of really good news organizations and economic research groups that provide some great analysis and commentary on the job market.
Okay.
They can help you understand what it all means.
Right.
And of course, there are podcasts like this one that try to break down these complex economic issues into bite-sized pieces.
That's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Make economics interesting and accessible.
Right, because at the end of the day, it's all about understanding how these abstract concepts actually affect people's lives.
Right.
So let's connect some of these dots.
Okay.
How do these unemployment numbers and all these economic trends really impact people's wallets and their sense of well-being?
Yeah, it seems like a strong job market would lead to higher wages and more job security.
Exactly.
Which would boost people's confidence in their ability to spend money.
Exactly. When people feel good about their jobs and their income, they're more likely to spend money.
All right.
Which helps businesses grow and create even more jobs.
Right.
It's this positive feedback loop that benefits everyone.
It's like a win-win.
Exactly. But what happens when the job market weakens?
Yeah. What does happen?
That's when we see the opposite effect.
Okay.
Wages might stay the same or even go down.
Right.
Job security becomes a worry. People start cutting back on their spending out of either fear or just necessity.
And that could lead to a downward spiral where businesses are struggling.
Right.
Layoffs become more common.
Exactly.
And everybody feels pessimistic about the economy.
It's a reminder that the economy is this delicate ecosystem.
Yeah.
And even small changes in one area can affect the entire system.
So it's all about finding that balance.
Right.
That sweet spot where we can create a sustainable economy that works for everyone.
Absolutely. And that takes a deep understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
Both at the big picture level and at the level of individuals and communities.
Speaking of those individual lives, I'm curious to learn more about the specific challenges and opportunities for different groups of workers.
Okay.
We've talked about the gig economy. Yeah. But what about other demographic groups?
Right.
Are there certain trends or disparities that we should be aware of?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the unemployment report actually gives us a lot of data on claims filed by men and women, as well as different age groups.
Okay.
This can help us see any potential differences or emerging trends.
So, for example, we could see if men or women are more affected by unemployment.
Right.
Or if younger workers are having different experiences than older workers.
Exactly. And by looking at these demographic breakdowns, we can get a more detailed understanding of how unemployment is impacting different people.
It's like looking at the job market with a magnifying glass.
I like that.
Yeah.
Focusing on specific groups.
Rather than just the overall number.
Exactly. And this demographic lens can also help us figure out where we might need some policy changes.
Right.
To help certain groups who are facing specific challenges.
So it's not just about collecting data for no reason.
Yeah.
It's about using that data to inform policy decisions.
Absolutely.
And to try to create a more fair and inclusive job market.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important part of the unemployment report, the industry sector analysis.
Oh, right. We haven't even talked about that yet.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
The report breaks down claims by industry,
Okay.
which gives us this really detailed sector-by-sector snapshot of the job market.
Okay.
This is super valuable for job seekers, investors, policymakers, everybody.
Yeah, I could see how that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Like if you're looking for a job and, which industries are losing jobs versus which ones are hiring, that would help you focus your job search.
Absolutely. And for investors, they can make better decisions about where to put their money.
Right.
If you invest in a growing industry, that's generally better than investing in one that's shrinking.
Yeah, it's all about understanding those market forces and trying to position yourself for success.
Yeah, and for policymakers, it helps them figure out which industries are struggling.
Okay.
And might need some support.
Right.
And which industries are doing well and they can encourage growth.
Right. So it's about using data to make better decisions.
Exactly.
For everybody.
Yeah. Individuals, businesses, government.
And it highlights how interconnected the economy really is.
Absolutely. What happens in one industry affects others.
Right.
Understanding those connections is crucial.
Yeah, we've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
From initial claims to continuing claims, from state-level trends to demographics, from the gig economy to those different industry sectors.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
But I feel like I understand the job market so much better now.
Me too.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, it's crazy.
But before we wrap up this section, I think there's one really key point to emphasize.
Okay, what's that?
These unemployment numbers are really valuable. But we can't forget that there's a human story behind each number. There's a person with hopes and dreams and challenges.
Right.
And their experiences are shaped by so many things beyond just their job. So as we continue our exploration, let's keep that in mind and try to understand not just the numbers, but the people they represent.
We've talked about the big picture of the job market.
Yeah.
But now I'm kind of curious about some of the challenges and opportunities facing businesses and workers right now.
Okay.
What are some of the key issues that you're seeing?
One that's been in the news a lot is the skills gap.
Oh, yeah, I heard of that.
It's basically the disconnect between the skills that employers are looking for and the skills that a lot of workers have.
So businesses are trying to find people with very specific skills.
Yeah.
But there just aren't enough qualified people to fill those roles.
That's it.
And is this just in one industry or is this happening all over?
It's happening everywhere.
Wow.
From healthcare and tech to manufacturing and even construction.
I wonder what's causing this skills gap. Is it like a lack of education or training programs?
It's a bunch of things, actually.
Okay.
Technology is changing so quickly.
Right.
Automation and digitalization are changing the workplace so fast.
Yeah.
And it's changing the skills people need for a lot of jobs.
So as technology keeps evolving, jobs are becoming more tech-focused.
Right.
And workers need to adapt and learn new skills to stay competitive.
Exactly. And it's not just about those hard technical skills.
Okay.
Employers also want soft skills like communication, problem solving, critical thinking.
Okay.
Those are even more important now as workplaces need people to work together and be more flexible.
So it's not just about knowing how to code or operate a machine.
Right.
It's about thinking critically.
Yeah.
Adapting to new situations and being able to talk to your coworkers effectively.
Exactly. And on top of all these tech changes, we also have an aging workforce.
Right.
As baby boomers retire, we're going to have fewer experienced workers in a lot of fields.
Yeah. So we're losing those experienced workers just as technology is demanding new skills.
It's a big challenge.
What can workers do to stay ahead of the curve and make themselves more appealing to employers?
Continuous learning is key.
Yeah.
Whether it's formal education, like a degree,
okay,
or a certificate program, or industry conferences, or even online courses, investing in your own skills is more important than ever.
It's like they say, the only constant is change.
Exactly. And the ability to change, learn new skills, and face those new challenges is super important now.
So besides the skills gap, what other big challenges are you seeing?
Wage stagnation is a big one.
So even though the job market seems strong, A lot of workers aren't seeing their wages grow as fast as the cost of living.
That's right.
What's holding wages back?
A few things.
Okay.
Globalization and automation are big factors.
Right.
Companies are facing competition from all over the world, and they have to keep costs down, which can impact wages.
It's tough because businesses are trying to stay competitive and keep prices reasonable for consumers.
Right.
But that can leave workers in a difficult spot.
Exactly.
Trying to make ends meet.
And it can create a bad cycle.
Oh, how so?
Well, when wages don't grow, people spend less.
Right.
And that slows down the economy even more.
So it just keeps going.
Yeah, it's a complex problem.
Are there any bright spots in the job market?
There are.
Okay.
The gig economy, for one.
Okay.
It's creating options for people who want flexibility and independence.
Right. More and more people are freelancing or working as independent contractors, setting their own hours.
Exactly.
Working on stuff they're actually interested in.
Yeah, and it's not just driving for Uber or delivering food.
Okay.
The gig economy is growing into all kinds of fields.
I see.
There are more opportunities for all kinds of skilled professionals.
So from writers and designers to consultants and developers, more people are choosing to freelance.
Yeah, it's a new way to think about work.
And speaking of new ways to think about work, we have to talk about AI. It seems like AI is changing everything.
It is.
What impact is it having on jobs?
It's definitely one of the biggest changes we've seen. People talk a lot about whether AI will eliminate a bunch of jobs.
Right.
But it's not that simple.
Okay.
It's not just humans versus robots.
So we should be thinking about how humans and AI can work together.
Exactly.
Instead of fighting against each other.
AI will probably automate certain tasks.
Right.
Maybe even some jobs entirely. But it can also help us do things better.
Okay.
And create new jobs we can't even imagine yet.
So we should prepare for AI by learning new skills.
Absolutely.
And not just technical skills.
Right.
But also things like communication, critical thinking, and ethics.
Yeah, because we're the ones who will decide how AI is used.
It's up to us to make sure AI is used responsibly.
Exactly.
That's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
We've covered so much today.
We have.
From those unemployment claims to the bigger trends affecting the job market.
We talked about the skills gap, wages, the gig economy, and even AI.
Yeah, and we've seen how important it is to stay informed, adapt to change, and keep learning.
Because things are changing so fast.
Yeah.
People who can learn, grow, and take on new challenges will succeed.
So as you're going about your day, think about how these things are affecting your job, your career, and even your community.
The economy is not just a bunch of numbers. It's the result of all our choices, actions, and contributions.
And by understanding what's happening, we can make good decisions to create a better future for everyone.
Absolutely.